You're going to spend a long time in the pound if you don't tell us what we want to know. But if you tell us what we want to hear, maybe we can work something out.
In the last 2 months, there's been no shortage of attacks and innuendo leveled against Charlie Kirk's closest allies, friends, and family as it pertains to his murder. Yet in that same time period, there's been virtually zero new information about the man charged with Charlie Kirk's murder, Tyler Robinson, who's rotting in jail right now awaiting trial. Why is that? Well, it probably is because the federal government is preparing all of the available evidence and that they are trying to make an airtight argument for the court, even though they've gotten a couple of setbacks from the judge. For instance, banning cameras from filming Tyler Robinson and virtually banning all cameras in the courthouse entirely, which is wild. Charlie Kirk was assassinated on live stream, yet we can't even watch his trial. Doesn't seem right. Something's wrong here. And part of the mystery is the disappearance of the radicalized, very disturbing little transgender furry boyfriend of Tyler Robinson, somebody named Lance Twiggs, who by every available measure and all of the available evidence seems to be a deeply erratic and unwell, very sick, and very medicated individual who had full knowledge of what Tyler Robinson was planning, who destroyed evidence about the assassination, and who didn't tell police officers about what was going on, even after he knew. What was going on here exactly? Well, for the first time, really since Charlie's killing, we have truly new information. A YouTuber named Turkey Tom, and I'd encourage you to go and follow his channel. I've just watched multiple videos on it about this assassination, and they're really well done and thoughtful. But he blew the story wide open with a whistleblower who came forward to talk about the toxic environment between Twiggs and Robinson. It includes drugs, black market, sex hormone therapy, extreme sex, ChatGPT obsession, and the CIA. Well, ladies and gentlemen, again, this is the YouTube channel, and this is the creator right here. And he's done some remarkable work in exposing through a whistleblower what this relationship truly was about. It's been hard for me to watch, quite frankly, and tough for the American public to wrap their mind around why this unassuming, blue-collar, well-meaning Mormon kid would go commit the political assassination that will ring in the ears of everyone who heard it and watched it for the rest of our lives. But these new whistleblower messages about that relationship paints a very, very dark picture. It paints a picture that we are either being lied to, that there was something else involved, some other larger or darker entity involved, CIA or demonic or both, and that potentially Tyler Robinson was being groomed for this. The Postmillennial writes, roommate Lance Twiggs was transitioning from male to female, resorted to taking black market hormone replacement therapy. Twiggs' parents kicked him out of their homes. He would occasionally send them money. Robinson moved into the apartment, leaving college when he decided he didn't want to live with his parents anymore. Twiggs and his parents appeared to have a difficult relationship. He wasn't respectful, and he was very problematic. He abused drugs and alcohol. Another relative of Twiggs said the relationship with Robinson was not beneficial for Robinson, and that they all got a whole lot worse after they were dating. Robinson played pornographic video games featuring furry characters and followed accounts that shared cartoons showing pedophilia. Online accounts that were unearthed allegedly belonging to Robinson on a gaming platform reveals that he liked furry characters and downloaded the game Furry Shades of Grey. Robinson reportedly played so frequently that he earned an anthropic cat character that dresses as a French maid. The game has 24 hot animated sex voices. Neighbors at the apartment complex where the two were living said they barely saw Robinson and that he didn't speak to anyone, and they would hear loud music blasting from the apartment. Text messages shared by Turkey Tom from somebody familiar with Lance and Tyler show that the relationship was bizarre. Their living situation was very unhealthy. So these are the three things that I would like to take away from this nearly hour-long video. Again, I encourage you to subscribe and watch the whole thing. But we watched it and worked through it with our producers and want to bring you three main takeaways. One, the living situation involved enormous amounts of heavy drug use and truly bizarre engagements in hoarding, in trash piles, and in erratic and mentally disturbed behavior. Here we go.
In his first message to me, this person said, "Hello, I just watched your video on the Charlie Kirk assassin Tyler and thought you did a good job. I happen to know Tyler and Lance in real life. I don't take a lot of pictures, so I can't prove it very well, but I am in Discord servers where both of them are, including the one where Tyler posted his confession. I have some pictures of the apartments and some stories I can tell." There were two pictures attached underneath. One of Tyler's confession in the Discord chat that matched the ones published by Ken Klippenstein, which were then republished by every major news outlet. The other picture is a completely original photo of local police at Tyler Robinson and Lance Twiggs' place, taken from across the street. For the sake of verification, he later also provided me with archives of the 3 Discord servers they shared, which I'll eventually go over the relevant parts of. Once this person's identity was verified, he proceeded to tell me about the state of Tyler and Lance's living space. The apartment would drastically shift from clean to super dirty, depending on the state of Lance's mood. I don't have too many pictures of most of the mess, but basically, he'd start living in the living room and just start turning it into his nest. After the first roommate moved out, and right after Tyler moved in like 2 weeks later, Lance had a really big breakdown. The living room went from a place guests came over to something that had to be hid. People still came over, but everyone got weirded out by all the trash. He basically had layers of wires, random Temu trinkets, decorations, random art projects, clothes, and empty alcohol containers everywhere. And if anyone touched it, he would get livid. One friend got banned from the apartment for a while because he kept touching the Temu trinkets. I wish I still had pictures, but I felt sort of guilty and deleted them since I knew Lance wasn't in the right state of mind. For context, I've been playing games with Lance and Tyler for like 6 years. I count myself kind of close to them, but I was trying to separate them from myself because being around them wasn't good for me. I say them, but Tyler was always level-headed and easygoing. But Lance could be anywhere from too depressed to talk to manic, wide-eyes, crazy person. I'll take a brief moment here to comment on the fact that in my original video, this is more or less the impression that I had, judging exclusively from Lance's more significant and expressive online presence relative to Tyler's almost non-existent digital paper trail. From Lance's Reddit account and the things his family members had to say about him, he clearly was more outspoken and in some ways unstable. There were Reddit posts of his mentioning being at odds with his family to the point of being kicked out, and he had also discussed a lot of substance abuse issues, which are a far cry from the quiet, even if uneasy relationship that Tyler seemed to have with his family. What was completely unknown, and as far as I know hasn't been published anywhere, is this combination of hoarding and mania that this person describes Lance as exhibiting. The messages continue. During this first nest phase, Lance started working very rarely. He worked with his dad for a tub repair company. They'd either repair tubs or install them at construction sites. But when Lance was super depressed or just too manic, he'd take the day off and hit his THC vape, drink, and scroll reels. Anyway, 2 weeks before Lance's first nest phase, when the apartment was mostly normal, Tyler moved in with Lance because he'd just dropped out of college and was tired of living with his parents. He had been working with his dad at a stone cutting business where they'd install countertops. Tyler was kind of your normal blue-collar Utah guy. Most conversations with him, he'd talk hunting, camping, gaming, and he loved to talk about fishing.
So the leaker here went on to describe how Robinson and Twiggs got into a gay relationship. Tyler Robinson was potentially a virgin, actually, when he moved into the apartment, that he was groomed effectively by the heavy drug user, Lance Twiggs, and was made far more political and far more activist through that relationship. Here we Go.
Between all of his turns while playing Magic, Lance would go hang out with Tyler, and we'd have to call him to the tables every time it was his turn. One of my gym buddies was the first to pick up on Tyler and Lance being really close. I was in denial for months because I thought Tyler was straight, and also I kind of did not want it to be true. Eventually, I kind of snapped out of it like the nth time I saw them asleep, cuddling on the couch. I kind of didn't think too much of it since Lance would get super cuddly every time he got drunk, which is how I think they got together, because I'm pretty sure Tyler was a virgin when he moved in. So probably when Lance was in the cuddly mood, probably something happened. But that's just my guess. This is where a lot of things start clicking together. Tyler, an introverted gamer who, as far as anyone could tell, had no prior relationships of any significance, spent 4 months living with his best friend, Lance, who apparently got overly cuddly with everyone while drunk, and simultaneously had the proclivity to drink too often. It's not surprising that this was the outcome of a touch-starved virgin gamer living in the same house as a touchy-feely, seemingly manic trans person. However, a while after Lance had mostly gone back to normal, things started to intensify again. I started noticing changes in Lance's political views as the presidential election got closer. He amped up the complaints of old people staring at him, which probably was because he dressed like a stoner and not because he was female presenting, because all he did in that department was grow out his hair and wear mascara every once in a while. He also hated that the construction workers would misgender him, which I thought was weird since he said he was fine with any pronoun. Tyler wouldn't really get political until after the election. He'd sometimes just casually bring up the latest thing Trump had done and complain about what it'd do to the country, but in a very level-headed way. Before the election, Lance's friend group was the quirky LGBT group with a lot of mental illnesses. Not saying the two are linked, but that's how my friends knew them. They're the people who are in Lance's server for the most part. After the election, they became a lot more political, but not to an extremist level. By this point, I could safely say Lance and Tyler were some flavor of left-wing, while I'd become tired of politics and mostly apolitical, but never anything I thought was like dangerous. At some point, they told me about their relationship and were pretty open about it after that. It became very uncomfortable for me because while I don't think of myself as homophobic, seeing two dudes constantly make out was a bit much. Also, since Lance's room was always super messy, they would bang in Tyler's room, and I didn't like hearing it. I cannot imagine how much it sucked to be in this guy's shoes. While this is a bit out of character for Tyler, who's been consistently described as reserved, it does match Lance's behavior of being overly transparent and letting other people, even people who randomly visited him, see into his intimate life to a point where it's concerning.
Clearly, there is some type of grooming situation going on here that descended and spiraled rapidly after President Trump's election victory, when everything became far more political and very, very weird. Lance Twiggs began to draw scribbles nonsensically, yet drawing about the CIA, writing multiple times the words CIA, and just finding signals in MK Ultra programs that have been widely used by the CIA. This is where things get really strange. Watch this.
After that, Lance went mental. I'd get to Lance and Tyler's place, and he'd be super wide-eyed with either a loopy grin or a rictus grin like the Joker, depending on his mood. The nest came back full force, and Lance started living downstairs full-time again. This is a picture of a kind of cleaned-up version. Imagine this type of mess, but denser and all over the living room and kitchen counters. He started playing on his DS and drawing stuff in, I think, PitchoChat, and scribbling it all out while giggling with the wide-eyed Joker smile. He'd either be doing this, or his experiments, or talking with ChatGPT day in and day out. He hardly ever slept. The experiments got scarier too, like jugs of water with a whisk full of aluminum foil that had 2 copper wires coming out of them. The water was clear one day, and at some point, I think the wires got plugged into the outlet because the water turned brown and the aluminum foil was pretty burnt. He also started leaving little papers around the house that he had scribbled on while doing that giggling thing. It's at this point that our leaker here sent an extensive set of pictures he'd taken of the state of the apartment and the notes Lance left around. First is an image of their magic table, completely vandalized with garbage that mostly resembles electrical stuff, which is odd because Tyler was the one in an electrical apprenticeship program, not Lance. In the background, we can see what looks to be some kind of aquarium or big glass container with rocks in it, which may be the mold experiments mentioned in the messages. Underneath it is what looks to be a package for a rock tumbler, which makes sense given that Tyler occasionally did masonry with his dad. But it's when we move to what's actually on the table that things get increasingly bizarre. First one we'll go over is this one, which contains a set of spiral-like scribbles that may be disconnected attempts at making the Glock logo, given the squared spiral G and the word lock near it. Right above this, there's also what looks to be the small phrase E equals T, and elsewhere on the note, I can also make out the words regent and temp, although I have no idea if this is alluding to anything in particular. On the right side of the image, another post-it has the sentence all of separate underneath what looks to be the portmanteau no linguals. This is very rough to make out, obviously, but bilingual means that someone knows 2 languages. Monolingual means that someone knows 1. Therefore, no lingual would mean someone who knows no languages, or someone who is nonverbal. The next set of scribbles is a bit more cohesive, although I'm using that word pretty loosely here at this point. Here we can see stop looking for others at the top and Terraria buggin tear ableist in the middle, which I think may be some wordplay with terrible and ableist. At the bottom of this page, an illustrated version of the word sine wave is written above lose it at the tude, next to a picture of some bizarre looking animal. This at the tude bit to me is very reminiscent of how schizophrenic people will break words down and obsess with syllables, word morphology, and portmanteaus. There's another example of this in one of the post-it notes where he writes, I'm alone, obviously doing what I'm talking about here. On another page, we have Monsumus Sumptuous right at the top, followed by SFTU Piteous, which I assume is like shut the flip up, idiots, maybe? Further down the page, there's a rough sketch of America with the number 21.0 inside of it, and nearby, phrases like go to the store and small box go listen to act. A lot of this stuff reads like Lance is just writing his mundane thoughts or whatever he's seeing on his phone in the most cryptic and insane way possible, but some of it does stand out to me as potentially meaningful or at least consistent. On a post-it note, he writes down TY and miss my BF, obviously in reference to Tyler. On another one, we have stop crying, stop stopping, and in one of the pages, we have the phrase full stop, very jagged at the bottom, although this may be bull or something else. On this page, there's something pretty interesting, as the words federated and fed-related are right next to what looks to be the word CIA, and further down, a drawing of 4 symbols that ever so slightly resemble what you'd see on a set of Zener cards. If you're not familiar with what these are, Zener or Zener cards were created in the early 20th century to test if people had extrasensory perception, and much later on, they were frequently reported as being used in gifted and talented education programs. There are a lot of conspiracy theories surrounding this topic, some of them being more credible than others, but they typically have to do with the CIA project MKUltra, and how Gate may be some kind of offshoot of it.
The whistleblower here said, bro, if I were religious, I would have called in an exorcist. The smile on Lance Twiggs' face was so effing scary. The environment Robinson was living in, I mean, it seems totally and completely sunken and demonic. You see this quite a lot with serial killers, by the way, or with killers. There is a type, and that type is somebody who's utterly disconnected from reality, living in filth, and has a sick mind. Many people, again, even the whistleblower here, saying that there's like demonic forces involved. Tyler told me and Lance had been up for 3 days straight talking to ChatGPT. Sometimes he would find Twiggs sobbing in Tyler's arms and Tyler would be rocking him back and forth. Even as he distanced himself from the couple who were allegedly having sex at the time, the associate said it's too much energy to try and deal with Lance. Tyler was a trooper for dealing with him. Tyler was basically his handler. Lance could act completely normal and then freak out. Per the charging documents, Robinson's mother said that her son had become more political and more leaning to the left, pro-gay, trans-oriented, and she confirmed that his roommate was a biological male transitioning genders, that he became obsessed with Charlie Kirk and Turning Point and didn't like his viewpoints. It's wild. So this, of course, opens up a whole new perspective on who was actually responsible here and what was happening. I've often thought that there's going to be a dark spiritual element to this. Charlie Kirk was a force for light and a strong warrior for Christendom. But this is far worse than I could have ever imagined, although it does make a lot of sense if you study these things and if you've covered enough of these stories, you'll see some major markers here. The nesting that they talk about, the erratic and sociopathic behavior, the drug use, alcohol use, hormone therapy, all of these things get tied together. And did Lance Twiggs effectively put out the hit on Charlie Kirk and use Tyler Robinson, groom Tyler Robinson into it? That's what many are asking right now. Where is Lance Twiggs? What's going on? Why has Lance Twiggs disappeared? Did Tyler Robinson murder Charlie Kirk to prove his love for Lance Twiggs and loyalty to the gender cause? According to the messages, Tyler Robinson's alleged messages, they were trying to flee and get away. And this was an act of love. We pray that all of this comes out at trial. We pray that they'll allow cameras in the courthouse. The American people deserve to know. And so do Charlie Kirk's friends and family. Stay focused, ladies and gentlemen, on this trial. Let's see what evidence comes out. And most importantly, let's give a thorough examination to the dark and evil forces of the left that were able to manipulate, warp, and destroy these young men's minds, so much so that they would commit the single most consequential murder in a generation. It's Benny. Like, share, and subscribe. See you.